Hello, Holliston. I'm John Cronin. Welcome to another episode of Just Thinking. This evening, we're very pleased to bring forth Dr. Kimo Carter, Holliston's newest superintendent. We're going to have a chat with him about his new entry into Holliston. Good evening, Dr. Carter. Pleasure to see you. How are you?
Hello, John. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Doctor, we are in the midst of a long, hot summer, but not far from the beginning of school. I bet a lot has been going on since you were brought on in early July. We want to cover a few topics with you this evening. A little bit about your entry plan, which I know you pushed out to the public, was it last week? Mm-hmm. And then we'll talk a little bit about communication with stakeholders, elected officials, including the school committee, of course, and educators who, of course, make up the workforce here in Holliston. I'd like to kind of move at the back end towards how your administration might begin to think about communicating directly with students and families, of course, a big part of your customer base, and then wrap up, obviously, our conversation. A lot to unpack. There's a lot going on in Holliston's educational system. But as we think about beginning new, the upcoming school calendar year, can you talk a little bit about how you have recharged and engaged new hires, and fill us in on what we can expect to see when school starts a little over a week or so from now, from what I understand.
All right. Well, thank you. First of all, I can't wait. I can't wait for our students to come back to school next week. I had a little preview today. I was at the high school and it was freshman orientation. Oh. And so I was able to see all the first year high school students learning the ropes as far as the high school. A lot of the student volunteers took them on tours. I got to say a little something to them in the auditorium, and it was good just to see them back. Yeah. And they're sort of adjusting, going from summer mode to school mode as well. Yeah. But it's nice to have, and they're new to the high school, and I'm new to the district, and so we have a little bit of camaraderie there.
That's great.
So we've been very busy. Over the past, I would say, 6 weeks? I've been here about 6 weeks, since July 1st. We've had a lot of new hires that we've had. We had our new educator orientation just on Monday and Tuesday. Our new director of teaching and learning, Karen Bourne, led that orientation, but every administrator was really part of planning that process.
Not unusual for a school system to see some turnover, right, from one year to the next. How many new educators do you think you'll be bringing on?
We have 40. If we count teachers and instructional assistants, we have 40.
Okay.
Which for a district this size, it's good to see the new blood, but it's also good to see that there is not excessive turnover. It seems like when teachers and instructional aides come to Holliston, they like to stay, and that's always a good sign of a healthy school district.
Right.
So 40 I think is a healthy number of new staff. Mm-hmm. I would say maybe about half of them are teachers, maybe a little more, maybe 25 teachers and 15 paraprofessionals. Mm-hmm. in that group.
I'll ask you a question. I'm not in the education space, so I really have no idea where I'm going with this question, but I'll ask anyways. 40 new teachers. I'm going to guess a big majority are recent, college grads, maybe the first time taking on a professional job. When you put teachers in a classroom, say they're younger, do they get some kind of tethered mentoring to make sure that their start, like a freshman, for example, entering high school, will be soft-landed and with full support? Tell a little bit about it. I'm just curious to know, do they get that kind of mentorship, or are they just put right into the classroom and say, go?
It used to be that way. I remember my first year teaching many years ago. It was that way when I was teaching 7th grade social studies in Billerica many years ago. But now it's different. Every district has a mentoring program in the Commonwealth. It's required by the Department of Education. Every teacher is assigned a mentor in their first 2 years. There is not only is there the induction program at the very beginning of the school year that we had on Monday and Tuesday, where there's a lot of information that's being shared, so that new teachers can get the right footing on there. But there is periodic monthly meetings with the director of teaching and learning and with the mentors and mentees all together. And there's different topics that generally get addressed as the school year goes along.
Good.
And often they're topics that are kind of commensurate with what's happening in the school year. So for instance, back to school night might be coming up, and so maybe the first topic is, okay, so let's think about family connections, and how can you connect, and how can you have a good back to school presentation, and then how can you continue that relationship throughout the school year with families of our students. So that's one example of that. And so really excited to see our group of teachers. Very apparent to me that our principals really made some great hires, and we have a really good set of new teachers coming in.
We've heard a little bit about an entry plan. I see that it was publicly pushed out by your office not long ago. I think, if I recall correctly, your plan is going to take some time, and which is great. You're going to extend yourself and your administration to four corners of the community to get feedback for a vision, a strategic vision that presumably later in the calendar year, or the school year rather, you'll be presenting to the school committee. Talk a little bit about this very, very important process.
Good. It is a long and important process, because what we need to do is we need to, I and everyone who is new with me, and that includes Howie Barber, who is the brand new Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Operations, and Karen Bourne, who's the Director of Teaching and Learning. So the majority of the senior leadership in this district is brand new. We have to learn the district. If we make decisions without full knowledge of what happens in the schools, the teaching and learning, the finances and operations, the culture, the celebrations, the spirit of these schools and this community, we're probably going to make a mistake. And so, and I think also when we create vision about where we want to go, it's best in the public schools to make that a collective, collaborative decision where all stakeholders are involved and integral to the process.
Think before you act.
Absolutely.
So seemingly, though, your administration will have up to a year before the community can expect to see something more definitively identified through the lens of what you and your team are looking to do. So I guess the next logical question is, can the community before then expect any changes starting, this school year leading up to when your strategic entry plan is adopted?
So let me answer that question first, but let me outline the timeline first of the entry plan that we go, because actually there'll be a lot of information coming throughout the year. So the first phase of the entry plan is the listening and learning phase, and that's when we're inviting everyone to either come to a community forum, and there's going to be a number of forums in the schools, or with groups of community members that are all together that sort of share a same purpose. So I'll be meeting with CPAC, I'll be meeting with the PTO, I'll be meeting with Diverse Holliston and other groups like that, as well as school groups. For instance, I think I'm scheduling forums right before back to school night. So if you want to come a little early and help me listen and learn before you learn about your child's teacher at back to school night, you'll be able to come, and that will be very helpful for us as we're asking questions, and we're really trying to gauge what we absolutely value here in Holliston, what we need to keep, what we need to leverage because it's one of our strengths as we move forward, and then what focus areas what areas of focus that we need to think about as we move forward. So we're going to have all these forums in the fall. We're going to do an analysis. We're going to analyze a bunch of documents and data also to sort of complement the stories that we hear from people. And then in January, there will be entry findings. And that will be presented to the school committee. I think it's the first school committee in January where it's going to be scheduled. And that, we're not going to pull any punches. If we see a strength, we're going to name it. If we see an area of focus or something that we need to really think about doing better, we're going to name that. So that will be the first time and that will be a public document and a public presentation, and that'll be the first time where people will understand from my perspective and from our senior leadership perspective where we think the district is and what the next steps might need to be.
As the school superintendent, while you're doing that and you have your vision goggles on and you're thinking about what those findings are you going to put down the vision goggles and put on your finance hat? Are you going to be trying to bring forth some of the recommendations through the budget process, which is also starting at around the same time.
That's right.
Okay, so there's some intention there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And the budget process starts even earlier. I mean, generally,
December.
internally,
Yeah.
the budget process starts in October,
Yep.
and then it starts getting involved with town officials, school committee in that December, January through March
Yeah.
time there. So what we're going to need to do is really take a look at the budget. And one thing that we are going to do this year that's a little different, and I think it's good because we're brand new here, is really take a zero-based approach to the budgeting process this year. In the past, my understanding is that generally what the approach was they took the budget last year and they said, okay, so what can we add, what can we subtract? Sometimes what happens then is that some accounts sometimes just don't get used, or some accounts become, for instance, like the technology account might need to grow because of the new technology that's out there, and it seems like prices are going up, you know, in that area all the time. So coming into the approach with a zero-based approach will give us sort of an understanding of where we are. Maybe there are some savings in certain accounts. Maybe we need to spend more in certain accounts. So we can sort of see that. And I think we're going to really need to collaborate with our principals, our department heads, our directors, and our teachers, because when you're on the ground working with students, you have that firsthand look about what are the things that we absolutely need to keep that are essential for the school to run, and then what are the nice to haves that maybe we can divert that to maybe something that's more essential.
One nuance before we move on, as you plan this outreach this fall, you mentioned a host of groups, both internal and external to the schools. Would the union and the educators, are they part of this phase, or do they come later?
Absolutely.
Oh, they are. Okay, so there wasn't any oversight. It was just
No.
you would give me a sample. I got it. Okay,
Absolutely. Good. Teachers, administrators, parents, students, big, very important group is to really listen to the students, and of all ages and of all sort of interest levels and things like that. Right. And then town officials, school committee, and community members who may not have anything to do with the schools if they want to. If they want to participate, we're all invited.
Right.
I mean, one thing that really attracted me to this district is the cohesiveness of the town and the support the town has for its schools.
Good observation. Let's turn our attention a little bit to the school committee for a second. They've had some turnover in the last few months, and I'm sure as they begin the school year, they're just as excited. Have you had a chance to meet with the members to get to know them and perhaps some of their goals?
Absolutely.
What's your
I've met
take?
with every school committee member one-on-one at least once, and many of them many times. Really happy to work. Really happy to work with Frank Ogura, who's our new chair of the school committee. He's got a lot of energy and a lot of new ideas, and I have some energy and new ideas myself, and I think we're going to have a really a positive year this year ahead. I'm really pleased that so many of our school committee members are educators, and they know sort of what it's like, you know, as far as to be a teacher or to be an administrator in a building. David Kayam is a brand new school committee member, and he's a legend here as as the long-standing Miller School principal. And I know from my conversations that even though we may disagree, we all have the best interests of students at heart. And that is the key for an effective school committee. Right. So people will see things from different points of view, and there will be that discussion, but it's always students first.
I think that's an interesting point to emphasize. It's okay to have a difference of opinion. Doctor, real quick, can you help listeners, especially family members or parents who are not as familiar with the dynamic between an elected school committee and a paid superintendent? What are the guardrails, statutorily or otherwise, that really define the role of every community's elected and appointed staff? How is it supposed to work?
Well, there's 3 jobs that the school committee has. They hire and they supervise the superintendent. Check, so that's one. They oversee the budget, and anything budgetary is under their auspices, and they determine policy. So they generally determine the what of a school district.
Okay.
and I am the how person.
Okay.
How are things going to operate? That is within our purview as you know, starting with administration, moving toward, you know, our faculty and staff.
Okay.
How are we going to implement the what that the school committee does? But it's always good to have that give and take, and always good to have that, because school committee members are going to have opinions about how, and I'm going to have opinions about what. And so when we have that dialogue, we know our lanes, but it's okay to offer ideas, you know, across the board. It's not like completely divided and we're not communicating. It's a collaboration, and so the dance is really staying in your lane, but knowing what the other is doing as well, and collaborating where you can as you're moving forward.
Right. Now, you've worked in other systems. Not as superintendent, you were in Weston, right?
Yeah.
Did you have direct interaction with elected school committee members?
Absolutely. Yes.
How would you characterize overall that kind of relationship? Was it always collegial? Did both sides play in that lane game?
Well, I was in Weston for 8 years, and so I experienced lots of different kinds of school committees. And then before that, I was in Watertown for 13 years, and as a principal, I was involved with school committees as well, less directly, but lots of different kinds of school committees there.
Yeah.
You look in the newspaper, and there's lots of different kinds of school committees all across the Commonwealth. I think one thing that I admire from each and every one of the school committees is that the participants as elected officials are volunteers. And that sometimes we lose sight of that. Most school committee members have their full-time jobs, and since COVID especially, the job of a school committee member has, as far as the demands, I would say have been at least doubled and perhaps even tripled. So the service that our school committee members across the Commonwealth give to our schools is just phenomenal. And having that there, it's hard to understand the work that a school committee member has to go through.
If I was a member of a school committee working with you, and we were at what odds, say over a budgetary item, you know, and I really wanted this type of investment done, and you are publicly saying, no, I don't really think it's a priority, I think we can get by without it, and this is going on and on and on, and you can sense displeasure, you can sense maybe some looming conflict. How would you approach that kind of simmering issue with an elected?
I work through the chair. Because that's sort of how things work. The chair works through me if the chair has some issues as far as my staff, and I work through the chair if there are issues with the school committee members. So there's always a partner involved, and usually it's a conversation. Yeah. And sometimes it's an agree to disagree. You know, we can't agree on everything. Yeah. And each individual school committee member doesn't have the power. It's the collective school committee that makes the decisions.
That's why I used a one-on-one example, because you could have a committee of 6 out of 7 that are hitting on all cylinders, but if there's one that is just not seeing eye to eye or in sync, I would imagine that's something you'd want to get behind.
Right, and you want to support that person, and at the same time
to best your ability.
Right, exactly. So, because again, they are doing what they believe is right for kids. I might be doing what I believe what's right for kids, and I'm going to try to work the room so I can get a majority of school committee members who side with me as far as where we want to go.
Right.
But I want to listen to the people who disagree, and that's true for anyone, you know, because there's community members who will disagree with what we try to do. There are parents, there are students, there are teachers who will disagree with what direction we're going to go. But it's really important to listen, to acknowledge, to see their view from their side, sort of walk down their arguments to the facts, to the data, and then show them that I understand their story and their point of view before I start walking up my point of view. You know, from there. Sure. And then sometimes we can come to an arrangement or a compromise or an agreement, and sometimes we can't. And sometimes it's just a disagreement, and that's okay, because we know that we have the best interests of students at heart.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. School budgets. We're not in that season. We briefly touched on it, but to say that school budgets have been stretched increasingly thin the last few years is a gross understatement. I believe this past spring, when school committee members were running, we had an extensive conversation about this. It was the season of overrides, Kimo. There were a lot of communities around us that were going down that road, some successful, some not. It's about a 50-50 grab. I think the people on the school committee recognize it's not going to get better as the demands for what a school can do for a child and the educational process can be. The costs just seem to keep going up. Are there any out of the box ideas that you would like to explore in Holliston, even on a small level? I'm not saying to solve the problem, Kimo, but if you said, in my experience, there are some things that we can do to kind of maybe slow costs or control costs. Anything come to mind that you can give listeners a sense of where you might be heading for on the cost-saving side of a budget?
That's a really good question. First, I do want to acknowledge that all towns are struggling. There are even some very wealthy towns who have had to really cut their school budgets, across the Commonwealth this year. Partly is because I think the funding formula needs to be revisited
at the state level.
And so part of the job of a superintendent is to advocate for that and be part of that political process at the state level, so that all schools can have their fair share, as far as what the state can provide.
So this is the Chapter 70 money.
The Chapter 70 money. And in my opinion, Chapter 70 does not favor towns like Holliston, which are small and a little bit agricultural, and so that's something that I would need to work proactively to see if we can do that. That's a long-term kind of thing. In the short term, Howie and I are looking at our systems and our operations, and I think we have some work to do as far as modernize and using technology to try to make things more efficient in our operations. And so that's maybe something where we could have some cost savings if we can find some inefficiencies that we can fix. I think another thing to do is to really work with our collaboratives and with other superintendents across the Metro West. There's a great thing about being a small district in that we know all the kids and we know we can take care of all the kids.
Personal.
It's personal. We know them. But small districts don't have an economy of scale. We need the same things that a bigger district needs. We need the business manager. We need the payroll person. We need all that. How can we work with other districts so that we can expand our opportunities for our students? Because we can't provide the same kind of program of studies like a district like Newton or Cambridge could. And how can we? Maybe there's some specialized programs that some districts can bring some students to us, and we can bring some students to other places.
Can I hear the word regionalizing coming in here? Is that weird?
It's not regional.
No.
I mean, that's a solution too, and that a lot of towns are doing. I'm sensing Holliston. I think Holliston's very proud of their own schools right now.
Safe, but we do have some regional presentation with Keep Tech and others.
Absolutely.
We do have that, but you're absolutely right. Holliston is always proud.
And we're a school choice district where students can decide to, Holliston students can decide to go to another school, and other students from other towns can come to Holliston. And so that's something to think about as well. I think another thing to really think about is to really take a look at who we are as a district, really define ourselves, figure out what we do well, and celebrate that. And make sure other people know that, so that we may be able to attract a few more students.
I'm going to go off the script for a second because you got my mind thinking about the way you and Howie were looking at using technology in ways that might save money. You're a highly educated individual. I'm going to guess you lived through the COVID pandemic like we did, and you want to forget about it as much as you can. But I'm going to guess that you have run across some studies or some products that help educators and policymakers like you. What did we learn from that period of time? It seems so long ago because maybe people want to forget about it, but I've heard from parents that the electronic learning process was good for some, but bad for most. But yet it introduced some level of solution for school districts. And I wasn't sure if you were like in a position to sort of say, broadly, this is what I think we learned from COVID, especially on the electronic side, things we can do right, things we can do better. Is that the wake of that coming into your thinking and how I was thinking about where we might go with some of the better solutions?
Maybe. I mean, but I would caution there, because one thing, I think probably the biggest thing I learned is that nothing really replaces face-to-face instruction. I think what COVID taught us is that learning is social, that when we learn with others. And I think the teachers who are able to...
And despite the fact that you might see others on the screen and all your classmates are there, that's not what you're talking about.
Right, right. When you actually have students working with each other face to face, I think the learning is more powerful for most kids. There's a slim group of students where those online academies are really helpful for them for various reasons, whether that's logistical or social emotional or other things like that. But for the vast majority of students, in-person instruction makes a huge difference. We learned that in COVID because no district was really happy with the way the teaching and learning was happening online. Even though I believe, I was in Weston at that time, I thought we nailed it off the park considering the circumstances. But the reason why we nailed it off the park is that we collaborated with our teachers union so that we could bring in our youngest learners every day earlier than many other districts. And that's why we had the face-to-face learning, particularly with the young students, but even with the older students. And the teachers who are able to create the classroom communities where students were working with each other so that they could learn together. And that often happens already naturally, like in sports teams. You know, we're working together so that we can win the game, or play productions. We're working together to put on a phenomenal show. But even in math or English classes, if teachers could create that environment, they had a much easier transition to the online than the teachers who weren't able to do that as well.
I hear you, and I think I would agree with the idea that in-person learning is organically the best, tried and true. If I could just split a hair here for a second, what if the children are in a classroom all learning collectively, but the instruction is virtual? Is there a difference there? Or were you thinking that in-person learning with in-person instruction is the best?
So one of the biggest, most powerful pieces of learning is not when the teacher's up front, like sort of introducing the lesson or explaining the material. It's actually when the kids are working. They're working on something that's challenging for them.
Processing.
They might be working together, or they might be working alone, and the teacher is floating around and conferring with students one-on-one. Okay, let me see what you're doing. How can we do that? Those little coaching moments, that's a sign of really, that's a powerful teaching moment. That's something that's there, that's really difficult to do online. And so those are the kinds of things that at least from my point of view, I'm so glad that we don't have to teach online. But I do also respect, there are some high school students want to take a class that the school can't offer, and there's an online opportunity. And there's so many college courses that are online right now. It might be good for kids to at least have one class at high school online so they get used to it before that high stakes college process happens.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Let's move a little bit further into the classroom for a moment. What message do you want to send educators? So these are the non-admin staff, these are the teachers, about what they can expect from your administration on day one.
So I think the first thing that I want to say to educators, and I will say to educators, I get to speak to them on Monday coming up. We have the convocation, and there's this
You're gonna have a gavel?
speech. No gavel. I'm not a gavel-y kind of person, but it's kind of like that. It's sort of a tradition. Every district I've been in, the superintendent comes up and makes a speech, and gets teachers ready for the year. But I think one thing that I need to say to teachers is that they're the center of the organization along with students. I mean, the work of a school district is really educator and student. Everybody else is in a support role so that learning process can happen between the student and the teacher with the curriculum. So if you think of the organization that way, where the students are in the center with the teachers and the curriculum, and then everybody else is the support, instead of this hierarchical kind of thing where the superintendent's on top and everybody else is below, that changes the dynamic between central office, school administrators, and teachers. We're here to support. We are servant leaders, where we are going to do the best we can so that the conditions are there so that the teachers can do the absolute best job they can with students.
Right.
And the expectations will be high. It's not like the expectations, when we're servants, we can still have high expectations. In fact, there's a famous phrase, be a warm demander. We want our teachers to be warm demanders for students. We want them to love them, but we also want them to have, have very high expectations and be very persistent in helping kids getting there.
Right.
Well, I think we as administrators need to have that same kind of relationship with teachers of being a warm demander. We have high expectations for our teachers. We want them to do their best, absolute best job they can with all students. How do we do that? And how can we support them so that they are ready to do that? So that's the mentality that I hope that teachers hear when we meet on Monday.
Back to the student for a second as we toggle a little bit now from educator. We hear a lot about attention spans of students today and the increased use of artificial intelligence and social media and so forth as a crutch for assignments. What can districts do to combat these kind of difficulties, Kimo? Maybe the combat's not the right word, but influence or control.
I mean, we adults, our attention spans are going down too. So, I mean, it's just a new day and age, right? Where having that multitasking nature or being forced to do that is sort of dominating our lives a little bit with the technology. Right. And so that's an issue. We do need students to focus, and it's going to take a little bit more explicit instruction to develop that skill because there's less opportunity for students to practice that naturally. So we do need to shift how we instruct students depending on what students that we have. I mean, the whole purpose of teaching all students is we want them to bring their full selves to school, and we need to meet them where they're at so that they can develop their potential as much as they can and thrive every day. That's what we want them to do. And if it means that students these days have shorter, expensive attention plans, just like we adults, so it's not just them, it's us too, how can we explicitly teach so that, and have them practice so that they can develop the attention spans that they need in order to be successful citizens and workers?
Is a cell phone ban a good thing?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a good thing.
Okay.
But we need to do it the right way. It's the how part of the superintendency. When I was talking about the what and the how, the what's a no-brainer. The research says that cell phones are really detrimental for student learning. Not only are there studies that show that students feel more anxious and more distracted, when their phones are on them, versus not. But also, there's a social aspect of learning that the cell phone can interfere with too. So I'm all for no cell phones in classes and no cell phones. I think the legislature, and they haven't passed the law yet. I think the House has passed the law and the Senate has passed the law, but they haven't sort of figured out.
I recall speaking with Dr. Kosker. She shared your opinion, and it was progressing. Through the legislature.
Right, and it might come soon, but then. The question is, how do we implement it in a way that's going to work for our students? And student voices need to be part of that process.
And parents.
And parents, absolutely. And teachers and school administrators. We don't have to change much K through 8 because we have that locker, that complete ban. But in high school, we allow students to carry their cell phones with them. And then they put them in those little phone hotels in class so that they're often away in class. But the law is going to say it's a bell-to-bell ban. So we're going to have to do some changing. We're going to have to make some changes. We're going to have to change some habits. There are a lot of people, adults and kids together, who have a really hard time being away from their cell phone.
Does the ban extend to the educators too, or just the students?
We encourage teachers to be, to have Models them off and away and model the good behavior. But sometimes there's an emergency, and we probably need to contact them. So they're adults, and they have a different job in school than students do.
For sure, yeah.
I know students are going to complain about that, but one thing that I say to everyone is fair is not the same.
Very true.
So, you know, this is the kind of thing. But people have to understand that and accept that and be part of the decision-making process. Like, how would it be best? Do we want to use those yonder pouches? Do we want to do lockers? Do we want, how do we want to make sure that the
Do you have opinions about stuff like that?
I have ideas.
Okay.
But the real ideas need to come collectively.
So you're a collaborator.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Good. We're going to look a little bit forward to the students and families side, and we obviously have a huge undertaking as a district as we embark on a new high school project. I know the high school school building committee is underway. You've spoken about that. You've collaborated with them. What do you think the school department needs to do to best educate the public about this project?
That's exactly what our committee is working on right now. We're in sort of that listening and learning phase, and I think we've had 2 meetings. So first meeting, we kind of appointed our chair. Barbara Ryan's our chair.
Great choice.
And she's been terrific already, you know, so organized and ready to go. So appreciative of the membership of the team, too. That building committee is top-notch. We've got a lot of people who've had experience with MSBA, both on the school side and on the community side. We have a lot of people who are highly organized and really really bring a lot to the table when discussions happen. We know that this is going to be a collaborative process. Eventually, you know, and it's going to take some time because we need to hire an architect. We need to sort of do a lot of requirements, you know, for the MSBA. We need to sort of figure out the scope of our school as far as that type of thing and their formulas that they follow and everything like that. But there will be a time very soon, probably in the winter or spring, depending on how quickly we go, where the community is going to be asked, okay, so what do you want in this new school? And there's going to be lots of different kinds of options. We can renovate our school that we have because there's actually some really good spaces in our school that may be worth keeping. But there's cost to renovating as well, particularly in a building this old. There are many details to sort of figure out, but we're already starting to think about sort of the areas that we want to think about when we do it. We want to think about flexibility in the classroom. We have no idea what school's going to look like in 50 to 75 years, and that building is still going to be there.
Right.
You know, because we're planning for generations, not just for today. I think actually Barbara's phrase, I think it might be a catchphrase with us, you know, we're planning for today, we're planning for tomorrow, we're planning for generations. So it's very exciting. But we're going to have a lot of probably online forums where different stakeholders can come and offer their opinions about what we really need, you know, as a school.
So observationally, Kimo, let me just say, as I hear you say that, and the timing of what the building committee will be doing, and earlier you talked about your entry, it sounds like parents and community members may be given options to communicate with the schools for 2 very important paths. They're distinctly different. So
Yes.
I would advise, like on the entry piece, you should say, this is not about the high school. That's
Yeah.
over here.
That's true.
So that we don't.
That's true.
You'll be getting. So
It's
folks, you'll be getting a lot of requests to contribute your thoughts. Just try to.
It's going to be a big year
Yeah.
for parents and community members. There's a lot of input because we're writing a new story with the new administration. We're moving, you know, with a new plan and with a new school. We have an opportunity to chart a new course, and it's really important to listen to all voices before we do that.
Now that Massachusetts doesn't have a graduation requirement exam, how does a district continue to gauge student progress with the MCAS losing their high-stakes nature?
It's a good question. It's a good thing we don't just rely on the MCAS, or else we'd only learn about English, math, and science.
But
the MCAS still exists. It's still required. We have to give it. It's part of our school report card that DESE gives us every year, which is really the report card. There's a lot of report cards that are coming down the pike right now. A lot of magazines are ranking us and ranking other districts right there. And they all have their own metrics, and it's always good to look at those metrics. But the real metrics that we have to look on is the Department of Education report card. How are we doing on the MCAS? How are we doing with our English language learners? Are they learning English at the way? And there's assessments for that. how's our attendance rate? How's our graduation rate?
Sure. Postgraduate educational opportunities.
Absolutely. What kinds of advanced classes do we offer our high school
Special
students,
education,
and what kind of participation that we have there? There's a lot of metrics that the state does when they calculate how we do, and we need to own that. I mean, if we're not doing so well, we need to own that and we need to improve. But that's the data that we're going to look at. Not all these, Boston Magazine,
Parent gets your phone number in your office, and they call you up and they say, Dr. Carter, I have 3 kids in the school, and I just noticed that Holliston has fallen further behind in the U.S. News and World Report high school ranking. What are you doing to make us better? Is your answer to that individual, this is what I'm going to do to make us improve on that ranking next year, or are you going to ignore that ranking and say, we're going to look internally and be the best we can? There's a couple of paths you can take there.
So I'm not going to ignore the ranking, because there are some metrics that U.S. News and World Report really value, and that's how they rank the schools.
Right.
So U.S. News and World Report, about 50% of the ranking is on MCAS scores, and that's important to me too. I want good MCAS scores, but I think they only look at the 10th grade MCAS scores. I'm more interested in all the MCAS scores from grades 3 to 8, and then also in grade 10.
Their sample is small.
Right, their sample is small. Their data is a little old too, usually. Usually those reports don't use the most current data, so I have to sort of figure out when that data was there, because sometimes data that's 3 years old isn't that useful for us.
But I've talked to some educators who say, it's not the school system. The school system is the kids and the brick and mortar, and this is the work we're doing to make it better. We're not going to try to become the #1 school. This is not a race. This is about producing quality education with what we have.
Right.
Can it be both things, or
It can.
And that's where you're coming from.
So the other thing that News and World Reports value, that I value too, is the access to AP classes and AP achievement on AP tests. So that's something. They don't value much else. So our poor technical schools, they're really low on this U.S. News and World Report kind of thing, because they have a different mission than what U.S. News and World Report has.
Yeah.
We have a broad mission because we're a public school. We're serving all learners. We're serving those kids that fit in that narrow U.S. News and World Report frame, but we have a whole lot of other kids that we serve too. And what we need to do is we need to develop that set of metrics so that we can sort of say, this is who we are successfully. It's not just MCAS scores. It's not just AP scores. There's a lot of other things that we can do, especially the kids themselves. So one thing I hope to be able to do is have a system where our seniors, our 8th graders, our 5th graders can tell the story of their learning so far and show us as community members how the Holliston Schools has either helped them or hindered them in their becoming who they want to be. And that is a really important set of data that would be really important to hear.
My next question is a little premature, because I know you have an entry plan, you're going to be looking at everything, but as you've spent the last 6 weeks, I know you've got an earful of the high school building project, but if I was an educator or a parent of a child in the Placentino school or middle school, I'd be like, what about us? Do you see any of the capital urgencies or needs coming in for the schools, absent the new high school project, which will be a dominant discussion over the next several years?
We're going to need to invest in the Woodland campus.
Yeah.
We only can build one school at a time, and with the budgets the way they are and the prices that they're going, we need to try to preserve our solid buildings that we have there. I think one of the things that we need to look at first, and as we look at sort of our budget requests in the fall, you're going to sort of see a pattern. I think the first thing that we have to address is student safety. So anything that has to do with student safety, I think that sort of takes a first priority. Safety comes before learning. That's our first order of business, to make sure our students are safe in schools. So whether that's doors, whether that's, there's a lot of like sidewalk work that's happening at that campus right now. Treads on stairwells. I mean, they're not sexy kinds of things, but it helps the schools become more safe for our students, and that's something that we need to sort of figure out.
Multi-year capital plan, I would presume, will be
absolutely.
in the
I mean,
making.
one thing that I think we need to really develop is we need to look up to about 10 years ahead and really sort of prioritize what our needs are, and then try to sort of slot where they might be able to be purchased, year to year, with some flexibility, because there's always going to be good financial years and not so good financial years, and
I'm the last person in any line approaching you with advice. Trust me, I'm not here to do that, but I will share this wisdom with you. As you approach the process of asking the community to pay for a new high school, you will encounter some people that will may cast criticism in the direction of the schools that if you had taken better care of the schools you have, you wouldn't need to replace them every 50 years or something along that. It's something that comes up all the time. And I think as you encounter or you begin to go on that path of building the argument and the system program, if you will, for the high school, if you're over here taking care of those schools and you can empirically show here are our investments to take care of the ones that were built 25 years ago, you're going to stem some of that criticism.
Right.
It's not cheap to take care of a building. You mentioned that. The capital costs are not getting any cheaper, but it's more expensive to replace them. And I think the taxpayers have the expectation that as stewards of a public asset, through you and your staff, they're always looking at ways to keep those small things improved in a school experience. So I'm sure you've thought about that, you know about it, but it's a double-edged sword.
No, thank you.
As you think about the next steps.
And I think that's one of the reasons why we do need to focus on the Woodland campus as we're thinking about the high school. They're great buildings. There's a lot of space. I mean, the brand new buildings the way the MSBA calculates its formula for square footage, it's not going to even approach the size of any of these buildings for the amount of students that we have. Yeah. So there's a lot to be said for keeping keeping up, and at the same time, teaching and learning has changed. When this high school was built, in 1968, 69, something around there?
Late 69, I believe.
69, 70, yeah, something like that. There was a very different conception of what the high school needed. I mean, and so sometimes, when there's, for instance, in the 70s, security wasn't a huge focus. Security is a huge focus right now, and it's important. So thinking about that and how we refit the buildings so that we can be safe on 21st century standards and not 20th century standards, I think is something to think about, and that does take some cost.
Doctor, I want to wrap up by first of all saying thank you for coming in. It's really been a pleasure talking with you and getting to know your thoughts, and you're going to be quite busy, and it sounds like you're up for the task. You'll need a lot of coffee over the next...
I'm ready to go there.
I can hear it.
Yeah.
If people have questions about what's happening in Holliston Schools on the how side, how can they reach you? How would you prefer that they handle their communication to the school system?
So email's the right way to connect with me, and I love Holliston because it's small. I've always worked in a small district. All my towns that I've worked in is a small district, and I like that because it's personal, and you can actually know kids and know families and meet with them more than if you were in a much larger district. That being said, I have a great team working with me, not just our new people, but our people who have been here for a while. I have a great group of principals. We have a great group of central office leaders as well. And so sometimes when the topic is they would be more helpful to you. Like, for instance, if it's a special education situation, Jess Beatty would be the right person to connect with. If it's a busing situation, Howie would be the best person to connect with, or our transportation director. If it's something that's happening at the middle school, Karen Manning would be the right person to connect with. So I can also help connect you with the right people, but I'm also on this listening and learning tour. So if you want to schedule a meeting with me, I'll help you if you tell me a little bit about Holliston, and then we can help each other out as we move there.
As we wrap up, I guess I'm curious to hear, you're an optimist through your words. In 1 year, if we're sitting here, a year older and wiser, you're looking back, what would you hope between now and then your administration looks like and the system looks like?
It's good. You're right, I'm relentlessly optimistic.
It's good.
Yes, in some ways. It might, It's hard to
hang
live
with me. You'll get a
sometimes.
little bit of
Yes.
cynicism and pessimism,
All right,
but that's
there we go.
okay. But I think it's important. I mean,
But a
you
year
have to
in
check
advance.
yourself, right? What's the
Absolutely.
you can be optimistic, but realistically,
Right.
you won't have a high school in a year.
So
But
a year from now,
yeah.
we will have a plan. We will have a collaborative strategic plan that we will be able to follow, a 3 to 5 year plan that we're ready to go. We will also have, I think one thing that we're going to work on this year is to also, you can't improve just with a plan. You've got to also sort of prime the engine of the organization as well. Organizations work best when people trust each other, when they collaborate well, when they're connected with one another. You see schools, you'll see their organizational chart, but that's not how schools run. Schools run because of the relationships that people have with one another, the relationships between parents and teachers, the relationships between students, parents, and teachers all together. Administrators are in the loop right there, with the center, the students with the teachers. So if the more connected the school is, with the highest trust, the higher the amount of trust, the more we can move the organization forward when we have a direction. And particularly when the direction is collaborative and there's a consensus about where we want to go, that's when we actually can get results done. I mean, there's a lot of districts out there that have these wonderful plans, but then they're not able to actually implement what they need to do. The first order of business is to get the organization together, working together so that they can do that. So by next year, we're going to have much more cohesive, trusting relationships among all stakeholders so that when we have the plan, we actually can get something accomplished.
You're going to be able to measure that?
We will. There's 2 ways to measure it. One way is to measure it, has the teacher's practice changed? Whatever we decide to do, has the practice changed?
Okay.
And then, and it'll take a little bit longer because students are the way they are the student outcomes affected by that change in practice? And so those are the metrics that you got to use when you're calculating improvement. Have we changed the practice so that we match best practices better? And then because of that, are we getting better student outcomes?
Outstanding.
All right.
Pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure to meet
All
you,
the very
too.
best to you.
Thank you.
Holliston is a very supportive community for education. I think you made the right choice.
I think I did too.
All
I'm
right.
so excited to be here, and I
right.
really thank everyone for the warm welcomes that I've experienced so far.
I know HCAT's going to allow you to host your own show, and that's great, but I may haul you back in from time to time just to connect and say hello, maybe on major initiatives coming up.
I'd love to talk with you.
Okay.
Yes.
Holliston, I want to thank you for joining us for another episode of Just Thinking with, in this case, our new superintendent, Dr. Kimo Carter. We hope you enjoyed this past few minutes talking with Kimo about the vision of Holliston and what's to come. Meanwhile, I hope you have a pleasant evening, and we look forward to seeing you down the road. Good night.